I got a comment on my video to add Sawblades in my game. And I immediately thought, that's a great idea. How fast can I deliver on this guy's idea? Maybe, if I'm fast enough, the YouTube gods will praise me with many views. Time to start the clock and get to work. I started by drawing the Sawblade. I found that by starting with drawing things, I can quite quickly get some idea of how I want it to interact with other objects in the game. After drawing the Sawblade, I put it into the game. One thing I immediately noticed when I started rotating it was that we don't actually want the specular highlights to rotate together with the blade. We want them to stay static in the world. So I created a shader in Shader Graph where I apply the inverse rotation, so I get back to a UV space that is not rotated. And then I apply this specular gradient on top of the sprite with the soft light blend mode. And here is how it looks rotated in the game. Now let's look at the gameplay. Before I start coding, I like to look at what existing components are in my game. There are two components that stand out. The first one is the well-done stack component. I've already been using this component for a lot of things. For example, I used it a lot in my previous video, where I made it so that you could stack a belt on top of a gear, as well as stacking this ice dragon statue on top of a gear. The well-done stack component kind of makes the objects weld together. Using physics engine terms, they are basically jointed together. So I applied that on the gear, and it worked beautifully out of the box. So we got that thing solved. The second component is the damage component, because we need some way for the Sawblade to deal damage. I initially planned to use the damaging component together with the new component called something like damage by velocity. My idea was that the damage by velocity component would be updating the damaging value of the damaging component. But I noticed that the damaging component only dealt initial contact damage to enemies. And we actually want the Sawblade to deal continuous damage. As long as something is touching the Sawblade, and as long as the Sawblade is rotating, it should deal damage. So I actually decided to scrap the idea of using the damaging component entirely. I didn't want to make the damaging component more complex. It is already working very well in a lot of different scenarios where I need to deal damage. So I decided to make a brand new component, a dedicated component, and I called it damage per degree component. What this component does is that it tracks what objects are overlapping it using the onCollision enter and onCollision exit methods, and adds those objects into a hash set. And when the Sawblade has rotated more than a specific degree, then it deals damage to all of those objects that it is tracking. By doing it this way instead, we are not actually increasing how strong the hits are from the Sawblade when it's rotating faster. We're just changing it so that it deals damage more often. And this will have some interesting impact on self-damaging builds that I want to show you later. But first, let's see it with some enemies. Looks good, right? Only one thing missing: audio. I usually get most of my sounds from the GDC audio bundle. There are some very high quality sounds in there. You just have to look and be a bit creative with your searches. I use an app called Soundly that allows me to do very fuzzy searches and find kind of similar terms to what I'm searching for, which works really well to find sounds. And I found this saw sound that sounded really good. So I extracted a very short part of it, added a little bit of fade to it, and then I added it in the game and played it whenever an enemy took damage. But as you can maybe hear, the sound got quite annoying. And I think one big reason for this is that we're continuously hearing overlaps of the sound. I was actually looking in Unity if there was any way to set the amount of sounds that could be played at one time for a specific sound. And I didn't find any limit that would be per sound. So what I decided to do instead was to make a longer looping sound and then fade it in and out. I also wanted something that was a bit less realistic, and I actually had a really luck with a preset I found in Sawyer called Chainsaw. It sounds like this. Exactly what we need. Now we just have to play a long tone of it, render that tone, and make it looping by crossfading the end with the start. Here is how it sounds. As you can maybe tell, this is now being played a lot more continuously. I changed so that I don't just play it on damage, but I play it as long as there is contact. And I actually want to have your feedback about what you think sounds best. Let's call it option A, continuous. And here is option B, on damage. Tell me which one you like, or if there is something that I should change up completely. To be honest, I'm not completely satisfied with this sound. I think if you played it for a long time, it could sound annoying. I want the player to be able to have a Sawblade in their base as a core part of their build, and I don't want it to start getting annoying and that they have to remove it just because of the sound. So if you have any ideas on how to improve it even further, please tell me so. Do you remember how I said that the Sawblade would deal damage more frequently when it's spinning faster rather than dealing more damage? This actually makes it kind of interesting for self-damaging builds. For example, here is the damage rocket launcher that fires a rocket whenever it's damaged. If we put the Sawblade next to it and start rotating the Sawblade, we can see that we almost have an automatic machine gun. Now we just need to find a way to heal or repair the rocket launcher. User @with_e also had some other cool ideas. One of them was a Woundup Fist that could work as sort of punching enemies. And I think it would be really cool in my game. One of the things I would like to do with the fist is that maybe make it so that it doesn't deal a lot of damage on its own, but that you could either rely on its knockback effect for some fun stuff, but also that you could maybe attach stuff to the fist. Like maybe you could attach spikes to the fist to increase the damage. Or you could actually put something we have worked on before, like the rocket launcher, so that you can control the position of the rocket launcher using the fist. It would make it become sort of like a piston that you have in Minecraft, but with just some more flavor to it, and I think that could work really good. Another thing I really would like to add is this portal that I worked with on my 3D prototype, and I would need to convert it to 2D, and I'm kind of like excited about the challenge of trying to make it to look as good in 2D as I got it to look in 3D. Tell me what you would prefer to see in the next video. Maybe you have some ideas of your own. Thanks for watching, see you next time.